This fish keeping hobby, when you first dive into it, can feel so complicated. My goal for this video is to make you guys realize just how simple it really is. So from start to finish, I want to give you guys exactly what you need to start your very first aquarium successfully. Let's dive in. Now there's a gang of things that we really need to get into, so the first thing we're going to touch on is equipment. Deciding on what size tank that you should get in this hobby can feel really confusing. Ultimately, it's going to come down to, do you have enough space in your house for the size tank you want? And understanding that generally, the larger the tank, the easier the hobby. And in a small tank, a little bit of a difference can make a massive impact. Whereas in a large tank, a little bit of a difference makes a little bit of an impact. So though it might seem scary or daunting to have a large fish tank to start with, it may not be a bad idea. The only other factor that really comes into play is your budget. Obviously, bigger tank means bigger tech, and bigger techs and bigger tanks cost a little bit more money. I would always say invest up front and you'll end up with less maintenance time, less worry, less overall stress keeping fish if you go for a bigger one. Once you've decided on your tank size, you've got to move into something called filtration. Filtration is essentially what stops heavy particles like fish waste from staying in your tank. It gets caught in a filter. The other thing that filtration does is it keeps something called the nitrogen cycle flowing and keeps your fish alive. Once you learn a little bit about the nitrogen cycle, it goes very, very deep, to the point that you realize the nitrogen cycle is the whole reason humans can even exist on the earth in the first place. So very, very deep rabbit hole, that one, but definitely worth learning. Now, when it comes to filtration, the options are always vast and they depend on the size tank you've decided. I would say as a good general rule, if you're wanting to keep a decent amount of fish, which is what most people get into the hobby for, start with a canister filter that matches the size of your tank. Almost all canister filters that you buy will have a liter rating on them. As long as you match the, say it's a 100-liter tank to a 100-liter canister filter, you're fine. Me personally, I always try to double the amount of filtration capacity that I do have in my tank. So for example, if I have a 100-liter tank, I try and get a filter that says up to 200 liters written on it, and you're good. Once your mechanical filtration's good and your biological filtration's good, you've also got something called chemical filtration, like carbon and other things that you can add to your filter. Carbon will tend to catch microparticles and other waste particles that might stay suspended in your water column. So that might be a good addition, especially at the start of a fish tank too, while there's lots of fluctuations happening. Moving on to heating your aquarium. In the fish hobby, most fish that you get that have got really bright colors are actually considered tropical fish. Tropical fish like warm water. And to make your water warmer than the outside temperature, you need a heater. There's plenty of aquarium heaters to choose from. I always tend to go for heaters that do up to double the recommended amount, or I'll get ones that are the recommended amount, but I'll run 2 heaters. And the reason I do that is because sometimes heaters can malfunction or burn out or just stop working altogether, especially when they're being worked all the time to keep your water warm. If you have 2 and one fails, the other one will be working really hard, but at least your fish won't suffer from a massive drop in temperature, something that you'll learn about the hard way if you don't run 2 heaters. Now we're gonna move on to lighting your fish tank. Probably the biggest realization that I've had recently is great lighting does wonders for your fish tank, and average lighting leaves you with all of these problems that seem to keep coming up and coming up and coming up that you don't seem to have the solution for. But once you've chosen the style of tank to go with, that's when you choose your lighting. All you really want to do, and the advice that I can give you, is if you're gonna grow lots of plants and you have very colorful fish that you want to bring the light out in, I would go higher quality. Now the other side of that equation is there are some high quality lights that are really expensive to run. They actually burn more energy, which means you have to start to factor energy bills in to your fish keeping hobby. There is a brand of lights that I use personally called Illumagic Pixels. You can get them in all sorts of varieties and their lighting seems to be really, really intense, and the efficiency of that light also seems to be really intense. The lifetime warranty that you get on those lights is amazing. Illumagic pixels is what I am gonna go with in my new fish tank build, which is coming in a month. And I will leave the link to those pixels in the description below so you guys can have at it. If budget is coming into play a lot in this fish tank building journey, then any aquarium light will do, and it will get you going and you'll be able to see your fish and it can be beautiful. Just keep in mind that the consumption over time will eventually outweigh your initial upfront investment, but each to their own. It comes down to what you can do right now diving into the hobby. Now with your lighting, it's very important not to keep them on 24 hours a day. When I first dived into this hobby, that was something that I really got into until I started running into algae issues. I also didn't realize that having those lights on all the time was stressing out my fish ever so slowly. A good general rule is turn your lights on when the sun comes up and off when the sun goes down. Perfect. Now, up to this point in the video, you guys have got a bare fish tank with all of the tech and lighting that you need. Now it's time to fill that fish tank. You get to choose, and this is probably the coolest part of the hobby, what to put in that tank. What you put in your fish tank is called an aquascape. Lots of aquascapers will get natural components of the world and join them all together. So you'll find lots of painting techniques that blend in, lots of natural geometry techniques that also blend in with aquascaping, and the ones that seem to have all those techniques come in together with the least resistance tend to be the fish tanks that you stare at for such a long time, and the relaxation effects happen instantly. So you've got choices. You can have your fish tank be bare bottom. So if you're wanting to just really enjoy your fish and you're going for a larger fish tank, a lot of people do go for a bare bottom tank. You can put aqua soil in your fish tank. If you're looking to go a heavily planted tank, or you're wanting to put shrimp in your tank or any form of crustacean, then aqua soil is 100% the way to go. If you don't want to go for a bare bottom fish tank, or you don't want to spend a bunch of money on aqua soil to grow your plants, you do have other options. Now, some stemmed aquarium plants won't do well in sand. So if you're going for a sand only tank, understand that you're ruling out quite a few stemmed plants. That doesn't mean that there's not plenty of other plants that do not need to be rooted in your substrate. If you do want to plant plants in your substrate, make sure to be gravel heavy, because gravel has the gaps in between each piece to be able to allow nutrients to seep in and allow roots a chance to grow out. So if you're wanting that natural look still, but you're also wanting to plant plants, go gravel. Now, the reason I hammer plants so heavily is because in the nitrogen cycle, one of the final resting places of fish waste is nitrates. Nitrates need to be manually removed from your fish tank by water changing, which means taking out the water that you have in your fish tank and replacing it with fresh water. Or the other way it's removed is it's used as fertilizer for your plants. So your plants living in the tank, remove the nitrates in your tank. Make sure you keep an eye on your nitrate level, or have a really heavily planted tank and you'll be fine. Now that you've got all this information, you feel like you're ready to go and build a fish tank and put all this kit on it and then throw fish in it. Here's why that's not the best idea. The nitrogen cycle is a process that is natural. And when you set up a bunch of things, a glass box with all this plastic equipment and rubber tubes, and then plug it all in and it's running, you think you've got a natural ecosystem, but it's lacking the biological aspect that rivers, streams, oceans have. This nitrogen cycle is based on bacteria. You will get the presence of nitrogen, and then you will get this bacteria, which is called denitrifying bacteria. And it's this balance that starts to establish itself over roughly about a month. You'll get bacteria start to grow in response to nitrogen being present. So what you want to do is, once you get your fish tank all set up, don't add fish. Put a bit of fish food in your tank. What will happen is it will sink to the bottom in the filter or on the bottom of your tank. It will start to develop something called ammonia, which is a really toxic thing for fish. If you don't have your nitrogen cycle established and you've got fish in there, you have an ammonia spike that could kill all of your fish that you've just gone out and spent a bunch of money on. Now, this might be the first time your fish tank has ever experienced nitrites. What'll happen is, in response to a high level of nitrites, the denitrifying bacteria that do nitrites will also start to grow and establish and flourish. It will eat those nitrites and turn it into nitrates. Those nitrates don't really go anywhere unless you water change or have your plants. Once you've fed that biology enough which actually lives on the surfaces of your fish tank and in the coarse media that's in your filter, you will have established yourself your bacteria needed to be able to go and start adding a few, not heaps, a few fish. That period of time where you've got your fish tank set up is all running and you're phantom feeding your non-existent fish is called your fish tank cycling. Now that you've got all the basic information there, it's time for you to go to your aquarium store, buy all of the necessary equipment that you need, or browse Facebook Marketplace and get a whole bunch of deals for all the things that you need. Let me know in the comments below what fish you're wanting to keep in your tank, and I'll do a care guide video on the exact species that you're looking to keep. Otherwise, hit the subscribe button to get closer to your aquarium hobby.